River Hill High School in Maryland, and I'll be one of your hosts for today.
Hi, my name is Layla Ibrahim. I'm a rising sophomore at James Madison High School in Virginia, and I'll be your second host today.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth No. I'm also a rising sophomore at James Madison High School, and I will be your third host for tonight.
One of our members, Evans Chun, is also part of our group, but he unfortunately could not make it to the career panel this evening. So a little bit about our organization. BranchOut is a nonprofit program with Veritas education leaders that was co-founded by Dr. Yushin Wu and Mr. Richard Wang in 2015 and grew from over 20 student volunteers to now 150 student volunteers in 4 short summers. Our high school student mentors come from over 40 different schools across 4 states.
We started out as a peer STEM mentoring program working at various community centers, homeless shelters, and county summer credit recovery programs, and have expanded into a community outreach program to promote cross-cultural understanding by featuring community heroes, creating research articles, and organizing career panels. As an award-winning community engagement program, we have received endorsement from U.S. Congress, including Senator Tim Kaine and former Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. Additionally, our innovator program won the U.S. Congressional App Challenge Award last year.
As part of BranchOut's goals to promote civic engagement, community, and STEM education, we are so excited to be presenting this very informative career panel. The design industry will and always has been an important part of our modern society. One of our featured panelists who will be speaking for us tonight is Robert Braddock. Mr. Braddock graduated from Virginia Tech with a degree in architecture and began his career with an international design firm, working on such projects as the National Air and Space Museum. Mr. Braddock founded Red House Architects in 2009 and has designed hundreds of home projects. He is a member of the American Institute of Architects as well as other organizations in Arlington.
Our second speaker will be Ms. Sumona Banerji. Ms. Banerji is a film editor renowned for her work as a set production assistant in Wonder Woman 1984. Ms. Banerji is an alumni of George Mason University who majored in production and post-production and minored in animation. Additionally, she has been awarded the Capital Emmy Award for Outstanding Achievement in Student Production in 2019.
Our third speaker who will be joining us this evening is Professor Ray Martin. Professor Martin is a visual artist and art professor and earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drawing and Painting from the School of Art at East Carolina University and a Master of Fine Arts from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Professor Martin has earned multiple awards. His artwork is largely allegorical and symbolic in content and conjures meaning in a manner parallel to the logic of dreams. Like his Cherokee shaman ancestors, Professor Martin offers his art as a gift for healing. He has also earned multiple fellowships and grants from art associations for individual and community-based projects.
We are thrilled to have all of you with us this evening, and I'm sure you'll provide us with excellent information regarding the design industry. Audience members, please feel free to type any of your questions in the chat at this point, and we will have the opportunity to answer your questions towards the end of the panel.
So our first question is, what sort of education did you need before entering your field? Mr. Braddock, you can start.
Okay, so I'm an architect, and to be an architect, normally one, majors in architecture at school, and there are really sort of 2 different ways that people do that. There are universities that offer what's called a professional degree, a 5-year degree, which is a Bachelor of Architecture. Or there are universities that offer a 4-year degree, which is a liberal arts degree where you concentrate in architecture, but then you're expected to go get a master's degree after that. So now at least that's the way it was when I was in college, which was a while ago, and things might have changed a little bit, but that was basically it. You get your degree in architecture. I went to Virginia Tech. I've been in Northern Virginia all my life. So I went to Virginia Tech and got my architecture degree there. And that was one step in the process to becoming an architect. Architect is a licensed position. So there are other steps like internship and taking an exam. But that's the first step, is getting a degree in architecture.
Thank you. Ms. Banerji or Professor Martin?
I can go if you want. Well, there are two ways you can, I'm a filmmaker, and there are two ways you can basically go down that path. I did my Bachelor of Arts in Film and Video Studies with production, post-production, and animation from Mason. However, I know a lot of filmmakers who don't actually study that as their degree. They study other things, but you can always navigate your way into becoming a filmmaker. I think one of the most important forms of education you can get is actually finding people who are working on sets and just going and working with them. Because even though doing a college degree is very useful, you get a lot of theoretical knowledge, and the biggest thing you get is a platform where you can be on a set and make mistakes, and it's okay. Like, nobody is going to fire you for it. So it's a great learning platform, but a huge part of it, I'd say 80% of it, is actually just like indulging yourself in that environment and getting hands-on experience with the camera, with the everything that I've learned is accessible online now. And so, yes, getting a degree in it is very useful, but I think far more important than that is actually going in on it and getting personal experience doing it.
Professor Martin?
Thanks. Well, as my colleague said, there's a credentialing matter. And I think one of the intrinsic goods that comes from going to university and on to graduate school is the time to simmer and to be involved in a creative environment with like-minded people, often of the same age. You're pursuing the same goals, you're buying time. The great painter Claude Monet said that an artist is 50 years old, and there's only so many ways to rush that process. And I would say the more time you can buy along the way, matriculating and also credentialing yourself. Nobody asked what school Picasso went to or Georgia O'Keeffe, but it's a springboard. And I think to be involved in a creative community is a key thing, especially in your youth. You need to feel like you're not alone.
Thank you for your insight. You must have faced a lot of difficulties while pursuing your career. So what would you say has been the biggest challenge in your career so far?
Should I go first?
Sure.
Okay. Well, so I would say that I operate my own business as an architect. I work for myself. So really the greatest challenge was trying to, it took a very long time to assemble all of the knowledge. And that's because whether it's architecture or anything in the world, when you run a business, the part that like I know architecture, is only one part of running a business. You have to know people, and you have to know advertising, you have to know contracts, you have to know insurance, you have to know a little bit of finance, you kind of have to know a little bit of everything. And it takes a long time to get there. You might hear of people starting a business when they're right out of college, but I will say, they probably make a lot of mistakes. It's very hard to do. And I've made plenty of mistakes. So I would say the biggest challenge is that I wanted to make this a business that I could do myself, and it took a long time to get there.
Well, my biggest challenge probably has been to constantly be inspired. So as a filmmaker, one of the biggest things is that you have to find stories to tell. A lot of people are born with the ability to have great imagination, be able to fantasize and create stories out of nothing. However, if you're the kind of person like me, I derive a lot of what I do from my life experiences. And so just like Mr. Braddock said, you have to know a little bit of everything. In order to be a good filmmaker, you have to understand people first. You have to really understand what people like, how to connect with people. You have to understand culture. You have to understand, what different traditions are in different parts of the world. You have to understand business and finance, because otherwise you're not going to make much money making the film. And you definitely have to learn how to work in a team. So it's an extremely collaborative thing. It's not a one-person show. So I think my biggest challenge was to be able to, and it's an ongoing process, was to surround myself with things that are constantly giving me knowledge, that are constantly teaching me about the world, that are constantly giving me new experiences and throwing me out of my comfort zone. Because if you do not grow as a person, and your viewpoint on life, you cannot be a good filmmaker. It would be a very narrow thing. You would be a very narrow-minded person, and people like that can make good films, but it would not appease the mass crowd. So in order to be successful, I believe that, like, finding people to surround yourself with and finding environments where you're constantly deriving inspiration is probably the most important thing.
Professor Martin?
Yeah, well, those are wisdoms coming from those two folks. And so rather than piggyback on what they're saying, I would say that the world kind of doesn't understand the desire to actively participate in beauty that we hunger for. And so you have to fight for the right to do that. You have to invent yourself and reinvent yourself. You have to be an entrepreneur by some definition, like Mr. Braddock said. And you can't give up. When I was a young artist, I would go to my heroic older figures and ask them, what's necessary in order to make a life this way? And in one fashion or another, I gradually came to understand that they were saying stamina. Thomas Edison said, genius is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. And the world's full of people with 1%, and is fighting the good fight and refusing to give up, and being able to not only invent yourself as an active participant in beauty, but to find a way to fit yourself into a society that doesn't always understand and oftentimes needs to be educated about how to appreciate what it is that you do. And so at the same time you're offering them these wonders, you're teaching them how to soak them in and to value them.
Those were very valuable answers. Thank you so much. You mentioned your heroic older figures that you talked to. So I was wondering, for all of our panelists, who was your biggest inspiration for becoming a designer? Mr. Braddock, you can go first if you'd like to.
Wow, that's pretty tough. I think well, when I was young, let's say when I was your age, I didn't really have a let's say an architectural hero to look up to. I just knew that I liked, when I was your age, I spent most of my time drawing and building models. And if you're young and you draw and build models, you might want to go into architecture. So it wasn't until I got into it that I met people who were doing wonderful things, and I thought, gee, I wish I could do that. And people that I worked for. So if I name names, you don't know who these people are, but they're people that I worked for that I thought, they were years ahead of me, and I thought, wow, they're really doing wonderful things. They're using their creativity and they're designing, and I want to do that. I follow. So I don't have anyone specific to tell you. I do have architects that I think are doing wonderful work that you could look up. If you like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen is the work of Santiago Calatrava. If you look that up, he does absolutely the most wonderful things. But I think it's more like personal people that I've known on the job who I really respected.
Well, for me, I'm kind of on the same boat as that. I am pretty young, and unfortunately, I haven't really found a mentor in my field yet. It's something I'm on a constant lookout for. And, it can be very hard because, especially in the film industry, you know, I mean, my inspiration was watching great movies and being like, oh my God, that moved me. I want to make something like that. But unfortunately, it's also an industry where you don't have a lot of access to these people unless you're part of the inner circle. And so I haven't been able to like still personally meet the people who I look up to, you know. They're big directors. They're directors from, so I'm originally from India. And so I watch a lot of Bollywood movies, and I watch Hollywood, and I watch Korean movies. And you know, there are so many people. Some of them don't even like they passed away, so they're not even alive right now for me to talk to, unfortunately. But I think that my biggest inspiration when I decided that, you know what, I can do it, was when I started watching this new generation of YouTubers who are travel influencers, and they travel and do photography and videography. They make documentaries, and you know, they build their career on a simple platform like YouTube, and then they started like blowing up. And that made me think, oh my God, if so many people are doing it, then I can do it. I don't really need like, I don't need a big industry, like I don't need a huge amount of resources and a big community, even though that is my goal. But I can start just with my camera in my hand and with a laptop that I can edit on. And I think that accessibility like completely changed my viewpoint on how I was going to be a filmmaker. So I kind of just started on my own, you know, just picking up my camera, shooting things that I found really interesting, finding people with really cool stories and trying to make something about them. And at the moment, but here's the thing, right? Since I already said that there are a lot of other avenues of life that you need to understand better in order to become a good filmmaker, I do have a lot of mentors in different fields of my life. Unfortunately, just not in my professional field, but like, I feel like I have a mentor when it comes to money, when it comes to understanding investments and how to, you know, budget properly and things like that. I have a mentor who guides me spiritually, because it is also a very emotionally driven field. And I personally feel like, you know, I've had to keep myself in balance between my emotional side and my practical side, especially when you're working with very sensitive stories. And so I have an emotional guide, I have a spiritual guide, and I have a financial guide. And I think those things have given me a very strong foundation. And you know, eventually, hopefully in life, I will find my filmmaker mentor, but still on the lookout for that.
Professor Martin?
Well, I have a much more specific answer than my two friends. Many great artists have inspired me since I started undergraduate school, but it all began for me very specifically with a fellow that not enough people know about. Many people your age have heard of Stan Lee, but he's not the genius that created the Marvel Universe. There was an incredible visual artist named Jack, they call him the King, Jack King Kirby. And in 1961, I remember standing at a little rotating comic book offering and picking up an issue of Fantastic Four #1 and just absolutely being enthralled. And without even knowing what an artist was as a tyke, I immediately, osmosis-wise, realized I wanted to be Jack Kirby. I wanted to conjure the Silver Surfer and the Mighty Thor and the Incredible Hulk and the Fantastic Four. And as I grew into my teenage years, like so many people want to be manga artists nowadays or anime artists, I wanted to be Jack Kirby. I had it all figured out that by the time he retired, I'd be ready to take his reins. And I practiced drawing the ever-loving Thing as often as I could. My dreams changed when I got to college and I discovered the world of so-called high art, but I would not be an artist without the imagination of Jack Kurtzberg, who changed his name to Jack Kirby to invent all the characters that have become the mythology of the 21st century for all you guys.
Wow, I really underestimated the impact of inspiration for art. So on a similar note, how do you advertise yourself to other people as like you reach inspiration from others, and how do you project that out to other people?
Well, in a business sense, it is it really is advertising the way it's traditionally known. My business is called Red House Architects, and I advertise in print in Arlington Magazine and online well, obviously on Google, but on a platform called Houzz, Houzz, which is a, it's sort of like the platform for all things that have to do with homes and remodeling. And also my business primarily works through word of mouth. And that's actually true of a lot of professional services that, my business depends on happy clients who tell their friends and neighbors that they had a good experience. So those friends and neighbors then want to call me up. But that's how, so it really is traditional advertising, the way you know what advertising is, and it's word of mouth.
So for me, this was a bit of a struggle because speaking to a lot of my professors and people in the field, I got two very different opinions on how I'm supposed to project myself. There's a group of people who say that you should be faceless, because if you want to be hired by companies, as an editor or as a producer, they want their goal to be your goal. They want their vision to be your vision. And so in that sense, being faceless and just being someone who is just an editor, would be very useful. But then this is if you're looking for a job with a company, that you want to be hired by. And then there was this other group of people who were like, you need to brand yourself, you need to differentiate yourself, you need to create an identity that is specific to you. And I have been trying to figure out which one at the moment is the most beneficial for me. I did realize that, given the current economy, of course, everyone's having a very hard time looking for jobs and, getting projects and stuff like that. And I realized that in this time of need, the biggest resource that I have is myself. And so I decided to start branding myself as, my own style of film or my own style of photography. So I started by creating a professional Instagram post. So like on my Instagram profile, I started doing my travel photography and my travel videography. And then from then I started building my website. And I realized the more I started doing that, the more I realized that I know that I want to create my own stuff. I want to direct and produce my own stuff one day, and probably for the rest of my life, create my own stuff. So it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to go work for a company, then you should put yourself down as an editor or a producer or a director. But if you want to work for yourself, or you want to create your own company and have your own business, then it's important to establish your own identity that differentiates you. And also, I think that, when it comes to projecting yourself, something that I did pretty recently, because I just graduated from college, was switching my mindset from projecting myself as a student of film to projecting myself as a filmmaker. And that made a huge difference because, even though, I just graduated in May, the way you think is very, very, the way you project yourself affects the way you think about yourself. And I realized that when I was thinking about myself as a film student, I kind of, you think of yourself as a student, you think that, it's not that much responsibility because you're still a student, you're still learning. But as soon as I switched into thinking of myself as a professional and myself as a filmmaker, my whole perspective towards my career goal, how I work, everything switched. And so I think it's important to figure out for yourself, like, what it is that you want to do 10 years from now, where do you want to be, and start creating that identity for yourself from now. So even if you are in high school, if you have made films before, you have done photography, you don't necessarily need to tell people that, hey, I'm a high school student trying to learn photography. If you have done it, then you're a professional. If you have experience in it, then you're a professional. And so you should project yourself as a professional, because that's also something that gains you more respect in the industry. You get a lot more responsibility on you and people trust you a lot more in the industry. So it really depends on where you see yourself in 10 years. that's my take on it.
Professor Martin?
Well, that's a good take. I appreciate what you said. A poet friend of mine recently said that a freeing mechanism for him was the realization that nobody cared if he wrote a poem or not. And there's a saying that there's no such thing as art, there's only artist. And I had to learn early on that I simply couldn't make great studio paintings and sculptures and mixed media constructions. I had to make people care that this was happening, and so that they were buying into the artist, and the artist's vision, not just the product, not selling one product at a time. Now, in terms of meat and potatoes, you start small, you try to convince some family member or friend to buy an artwork of yours and to hang it on their wall and make sure and sign it and hope that other people ask about it. You go to libraries and coffee houses and any sort of small venues, and you take any kind of show you can, you metastasize, you blow it up, you have a friend make a friend, as they say, so that your work gradually finds a larger audience and spreads, and people begin to write about you, and you build websites. And the 21st century is different than the 20th century was. And my son is an artist who's a digital artist, and he's teaching me new ways to think about entrepreneurship in the arts. And it's a different kind of thing than the sort of gallery and artist agent system that I started out with. And you have to change your die. And I would say that that's the thing to tell all you guys, is as current and fascinating and cutting edge as technology is, it's going to be different in 2 or 3 years, and then 2 or 3 years from then. So you have to change with it.
Thank you all for those very inspiring words. I myself have been somewhat interested in art for a while now, but I've been a bit hesitant to ever consider pursuing a career. So your words really give me a sense of comfort and really consider pursuing art as a career. I understand it must have been difficult to enter the art field, but another difficulty we're facing right now is the global pandemic. So how would you say COVID-19 affected your business?
Well, for me, it's sort of done two things. My work is, I design homes and home projects for people, additions, remodeling, things like that, construction. So there are really two ways that the pandemic has affected me. One is in design. I've had clients who put off their projects and said, well, we were going to go ahead with it and we're just going to wait. We're not interested. So that has an effect. And then I also have clients for whom we went through design and got a permit, but they didn't want the contractor to come into their homes. They said, well, we're not going to build it yet. So overall, the largest effect has been people putting off projects and just saying they want to wait and see what happens. That's really been, and I still do have projects going on. I have, there are projects where you don't actually have to go in their house, like, adding decks and porches or adding garages or things like that. So I have some projects going on, but it's really affected the work where people are saying, we just want to wait. We don't know what's going to happen. We just want to wait.
Well, this whole pandemic has definitely affected the film industry a lot, because a huge part of making movies is thousands of people, in one confined space. And so that's definitely changed a lot, especially with things moving online or on digital platforms. I think the whole pandemic is going to really shift how we view films and how we view media in general. For me personally, luckily for me, in fact, I did focus a lot on post-production and editing. And one of one of the advantages of editing is that you can do it from anywhere. It's online, it's purely based on the computer. And so I have been able to get freelance projects. Like, okay, so there was a job that I was supposed to do, that I was supposed to travel for this whole month. I was supposed to be in Italy. But because of that, because of the whole pandemic, the project got completely scrapped. And that was definitely really sad because it was supposed to be like, the next big leap in my career. However, because I'm an editor, I managed to get freelance projects. And so regardless of where you are in the world, people can send you stuff online and you can do it. And that flexibility has definitely kind of saved me and made me realize that having digital skills and having skills that you can do online, that is not based or bound by location, is probably going to be very, very important in the next so many years, especially if the effects of the pandemic continue. And so, every cloud has a silver lining. So yeah, projects have stopped and, come to a standstill or have been postponed, but now I can work for people in another country because everybody's working online. And so I'm not bound by these restrictions anymore, by physical restrictions anymore. And so it's really about how you decide to see the situation. You have to, if you have a positive and adapting personality, I think that this pandemic could be a blessing in disguise, because now, as I said, people are not restricted by physical boundaries anymore. You can literally talk and work with anybody anywhere in the world because everybody's online. So honestly, it just depends on how you see it. But definitely, I think that it's been hard. It's been very hard, especially newly graduated. I'm also here. I'm here on a visa, so that has affected my visa situation a lot. But I also realized, again, being a filmmaker, I'm not really looking to settle down in one country. I'm looking to travel for the next 10 years of my life and just, figure out what I want to do. So as long as I know that I can work from anywhere and wherever I am, and I can work from home remotely, I'm still secure. My job is still secure. So that's a blessing in disguise.
Professor Martin?
Well, I like hearing optimistic words like blessing in disguise. I think the COVID-19 is, it's hard to find happiness in that. Although the good news is the same as the bad news in my case. I'm making the best artwork of my life. I'm sequestered in the studio. I'm creating a quantity and a quality of work that fills me with delusions of grandeur. And I'll be ready for one hell of a show when it's all over. On a practical basis, it's been devastating. I typically enter art competitions and group exhibitions, single person exhibitions, gallery shows, museum shows. I had an upcoming one-person show at a museum in Southern Virginia for this coming year that's been canceled. It's a deep holding of breath, and I guess we all pray that it will end happily somehow, and there will be wonderful, boisterous, juicy, healing things to offer to the world creatively from this time that we spent sheltering in place.
Thank you all. I understand that it's really important to know how to adapt to different situations and deal with all the struggles that come at you in your career. And I really appreciate that. Just like Elizabeth said, I'm also interested in pursuing a career in design, maybe architecture. And since most of our audience are high school students, I'm sure a lot of us are wondering, what sort of advice would you give others interested in pursuing an arts career? Design or art or architecture?
For me, I'd say there's a very difficult piece of advice to give during a pandemic, But I would say the number one thing that helped me when I was young, starting out, is go get a summer job in architecture as an intern, high school, college, because you want to see what an architecture office works like, feels like, connection. And honestly, he comes and goes. When I got out of college, I graduated right into a big recession, and the only reason I found a job was by connecting with people that I had worked with as a summer intern. So I would say when you're young, besides going to college and getting your degree, the best thing you can do is connect with people, get a summer job in architecture if that's what you're interested in.
So for me, getting into the arts was, it was a struggle. The background that I came from, arts wasn't, in India especially, even though it's ironic because it's the biggest producer of film, it's one of the biggest producers of film. Doing the arts, the mentality towards it is that, oh, only the people who can't do anything better with their lives do art. And I think that mindset was the biggest thing that I had to fight. My parents wanted me to do law, or, to do like, a safe job that is risk-free. And I knew in my heart that I would not be happy doing any of those other things. And I think if you want to go into the art, everybody who goes into the art because they have a passion for it. It's because you need it, like you live, you breathe, it's your whole life. If you do not do that, you will go insane. And if you have that kind of passion, I say, like, just do it. Don't, yes, be smart about it. I understand that there's this whole thing about struggling artists, and so I knew that initially I wanted to be an actor. I have a history in dance and I wanted to be an actor. And I realized after I actually came to university as an actor, and I realized that, okay, I can do acting because I love it, but is that how easy is that to, make money out of? And, I realized that, okay, I need to balance practicality with my love for art. And I realized, hey, if I do film, I can act in my own stuff, I can make my own stuff. So I'm not dependent on anybody with it. So, you get a more rounding understanding of the industry. So there is a way to do it. If you are interested in art, and I understand it's not very understood in the world. I don't think people understand how important art is in the world. I think even though they consume art every day, everything that you see around you is basically design and art. I think the whole field is very underrated. And unfortunately, even if it's hard, even if you come from a background where your family does not understand your love for it or you need to do it, don't let that hold you back. Find a way to create a way that you can do what you love, but in a practical way, so that you're also, you can also sustain your life doing that. And I mean, I think that the biggest thing you can do, as I said, is find people who are interested in the same thing, pick up your camera, go make stuff. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and it's horrible, but also you're in the middle of a historical event. This is going to be an event that is going to be recorded in history. And so I've already seen, as soon as quarantine started, all these advertisements for people making films on what's going on during the COVID situation, right? And so see how people have taken a very horrible situation and realized the importance of the situation in the future, and decided, hey, I want to make the best I can with the situation. And so if you're right now at home and you have nothing else to do and you're bored and you have a passion for photography or art, just pick up your camera and just start doing it. Start creating. You can do it yourself. You don't need anybody else to help you right now. Learn it yourself and just go for it. Don't be afraid. It's a very scary field. The arts is a very scary field because there are a lot of factors that are variables. There's a lot of unpredictability. But that also means that that gives you the flexibility of you being able to create a niche, you being able to create what you want. And your art is, it's you, it's your identity that you're expressing out there, right? So just, it's important. People need it. Like, I swear to God, people need it in this world. So just go ahead and make it. Just do what you makes you happy.
Professor Martin, do you have any advice for students and other people interested in art?
Yes, well, those were beautiful bits of advice. The old saying is that cream always rises to the top. And how do you become cream in society where there are many people that want to be artists? You work harder than other people do. You attach more passion than anybody else does. You don't compare yourself to your peers, but to the great artists of the past. The indigenous peoples have shamans, and the shamans think that an artist has three tasks: to create, to teach, and to heal. And those three things form a complete person, and that's what we can offer the world. At its best, art can be a healing mechanism, and God knows we all need it. To study the work of the masters, because art is about other art. I mentioned Jack Kirby a while ago. And art's about other art, and it's about working harder than other people. It's about never giving up, and it's about what the Italians call niente senza gioia. Forgive my pronunciation if there's any Italian speakers out there, but it means nothing without joy, because that's what we need.
Also, I want to add on to what you just said, Martin. Art creates love and happiness, and in a big scale, because it can be viewed by millions of people at the same time, you know. And it creates, you can, you know, there's so many things going on in the world right now. There is so many things that are very sad that are going on in this world, and there's so many things that are very beautiful that are going on in this world. And unfortunately, the way, you know, news and media portrays things to us, it's more the pessimistic side of things. And that has caused a lot of, you know, sadness in the world. You know, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hatred, there's, you know, a lot of mental health issues, there's a lot of depression. You know, people are struggling just trying to like create their own identity in the world. And if you can create something that can inspire somebody else and that can motivate someone else and give them happiness, give them joy, give them support, or teach them about what's going on in the world, make them appreciate what they have, make them appreciate what the world has to offer them, then honestly, there is no bigger joy in life than being able to do that. And, you know, that happiness that you feel when somebody else watches something you have done and was like, oh my God, that has changed my life. I don't think there's any greater happiness as human beings that we can experience in this world. So, yeah.
Thank you all for that truly, really valuable advice and insight. At this point, we'll now be answering questions in the chat box. So if anyone in the audience has any more questions or clarifications for our panelists, please feel free to type them in the chat.
We just want to be a little bit mindful of time, so we'll only be picking a few questions from our audience. So the first one is for all of our panelists. Artwork can be subjective. How do you deal with negative comments?
Well, I can go first. Everything is going to have a positive, negative comment. Anything you put out in the world, people are going to be offended, people are going to take negatively. You can try your best to be as politically correct or as sensitive as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to understand there is always going to be just as much positivity there is in the world, there is negativity. And unfortunately, if you want to be a successful artist, you're going to have to learn to block that negativity out. When I say block the negativity out, doesn't mean block out criticism. Criticism is very important. You know, get feedback. If something is constructive criticism, consider it, incorporate it. But when people are always lashing out at other people. You know, people have their own issues, that people are angry about other things, and they express themselves by lashing out at people who, you know, like artists and stuff like that, because they misunderstand the art or whatever the reason may be. But you cannot live in fear of your art or whatever you're creating having negative comments coming back on it, because if that was the case, no one would ever create anything. Everything in this world is controversial, and at some point you just have to take a stand and you have to go with it. What you truly believe in your heart, just go with it. And if you get backlash from people, do exercises. Honestly, a lot of things that help me, like I know I'm regular with yoga, I'm regular with meditation, and what these things do is help you see things objectively, give you a different perspective, help you understand other people's perspective on things. And if their perspective doesn't match your perspective, ignore it.
Yeah, I think you do bring up something that is a very important point. The difference between criticism and negativity. In my work, you know, I have clients, which means I'm designing for clients. And regardless of what I think, it's their money, it's their house. They can change their minds. They can take something I've designed and say, I don't like that. And I have to find a way to work. I have to find a way to make that work. I have to find a way to keep going in my business with clients who might not like what I've designed. In addition to which, my designs get reviewed by the county for things like code and zoning, and they often come back with comments. And I have to remind myself, it's not negativity, it's their way of finding out whether or not something meets code or they want a clarification. And in fact, plenty of times I've made a mistake. That's another thing you have to realize, in not only in professional services, but also in art, in relationships. Everyone makes mistakes. So there is negativity, there is criticism, and you personally make mistakes, like I do, like everyone does. All three of those have to be taken into account. You have to learn how to deal with all three.
Professor Martin, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, well, those both of you guys were compelling. I guess we're all collaborating in a certain sense with either a prepaid viewer or a hopefully paying viewer at some point. I think you have to speak your truth, but I think the great protector is aesthetic power. When I say something strong that I'm compelled to say, I realize that it has to be particularly aesthetically pleasing, so that even if the message that's coming across is not easily accessible or easily loved by a broad audience, they'll have to shake their head and say, well, the guy sure can draw. He sure can swing a brush. He's got a great sense of composition. And you hope at the end of the day that the grace that's involved in making great things will if not persuade, then at least buy a little permission. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, guys, but for instance, I did an artwork called Juneteenth that's behind me because coincident with the COVID was the Black Lives Matter's surge of interest. And I felt compelled to make an artwork about George Floyd in that moment. And I felt compelled to make it with, among other materials, tar. And my sister warned me against it. She said, you know, that's got associations and the general audience won't know how to take it. And I just had to trust in the beauty of the forms that I was making and the purity of the vision that I had, that enough sensitive people would find access to it. And I've been pleased that that's true. So in the long run, I just had to put my trust in beauty. That's what the three of us, I think, in a certain sense, have dedicated ourselves to.
Thank you for your words. Another question we have from the audience is, since design relies so heavily on creativity, is it stressful when you run out of ideas or hit an art block? How do you work past that?
Well, you know, it's interesting that that has happened. Sometimes you just can't think of something. I don't know what the adjective would be. Clever or you know, delightful. Um, I don't think I have anything wise to say about it except you just keep trying. Take a break, try it later. You know, one thing that I do when I need inspiration is look to, you know, look to other images, look to other architects, look to other artists, and see what they've done. It's not copying. It's not saying I'm going to look at this person and take their work. It's saying what did they do and what could I learn from it. So so it's true. Running out of ideas or just hitting a dry spot, it happens. And I think you just take a break, look somewhere else, and try again.
I very much agree. That's a problem every artist faces, you know, when they reach like, they have like a dry phase where they can't think and there's just no new idea coming up. But you know, as Mr. Martin said, that art is all derived from other art. All art is derived from something. And I think that, yeah, there are two things that I generally do that have helped me. One is look at other artists, look at other works, and, you know, try and like feed off that, or keep your eyes and ears open and just do something that you haven't done before. For me personally, every time I hit like a roadblock, if not just in my art, but like even in my personal life, where I just don't know what my next step is, or I'm confused, and or I don't know what to do next, I take a trip, you know, I go somewhere that I haven't gone before. I meet people who I haven't met before. I just try to meet new people, because as soon as I do that, I'm suddenly surrounding myself with new information, brand new experience. And more often than not, that suddenly triggers something in you. You find out something that someone has done, you find out someone's story, and you're like, oh my God, that's actually super interesting. That might be something I want to work on. And then when you come back, you use all that information to like create something else. So I'd say the biggest thing for me is do something out of your comfort zone. Step out, constantly keep stepping out of your comfort zone, because that is the only way that you will literally, your brain will get new information about what's going on in the world. And that new information is what is the most inspiring thing. So yeah, just step out of your comfort zone, do things you haven't done before, and it'll definitely inspire you in some way. And but nothing that'll end you up in jail or anything, just to be just to be clear. Good things, yeah.
Hello.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear us?
Just a bit stuck. Okay.
Would you like me to speak on this?
Of course, sure.
Okay. Well, I was glad she put that in about stay out of jail, because I was considering some chancy decisions there. I've been pretty idealistic this evening, so I'm going to give you 3 very practical tips that work for me. One is I never have one thing going on in the studio at a time. I usually have a half dozen things going on in the studio at the same time. And so if I hit a creative block on one thing, I will simply move over to the other thing. And not only will it offer me a fresh start on something else that I'm not stuck on, but oftentimes it will rejuvenate me when I get back to that first thing that was sticking me. So I always have a plethora of things going on in the studio at one time. The second, I'm going to attribute this to Ernest Hemingway, but I don't know if it's true. But there was some great author that at the end of each day, he would type, it was back in the days of typewriters, he would type a sloppy last page of his story and leave it in the typewriter. And then he'd go home, go to bed, come back the next morning with a cup of coffee, and the first thing he would do would be to clean up the grammar and the diction and the wording on that sloppy page that he had left the night before in his state of fatigue. And so he never had to start from scratch. And that's a wonderful thing, not having to start from scratch. And then I have a sacred 15-minute rule. I tell my college students this all the time. After your dinner, go into the studio for 15 minutes. Just promise yourself 15 minutes. And the great thing about creative people is there is no such thing as 15 minutes. We live in these chronocosms, these time worlds. And before you know it, that 15-minute endeavor that you promised yourself has turned into 2, 3, 4 hours or an all-nighter, and you're back on the ball. So those are my 3 practical tips.
Thank you so much. That will be the conclusion of our panel. That's all the time we have tonight. On behalf of the entire BranchOut career panel team, we hope that everybody enjoyed the panel this evening and learned a great deal about the successful individuals in the design industry. We hope that everybody got a chance to experience the essence of the field and have their questions answered. The design industry has been a vital part of our daily lives and will continue to be for generations to come. We are also extremely appreciative of our panelists, Mr. Braddock, Ms. Banerji, and Professor Martin for their time and giving us such great insight into this field. We are also very appreciative of our audience members for making this panel so great and asking some wonderful questions. To learn more about BranchOut and our future panels, please check us out at www.velbranchout.org. We can type that in the chat, or like us on Facebook at Veritas Education Leaders. We can also type that name in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you everybody for coming. And you can check us out in the chat. The links are in the chat.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming.
Ray, Sumona, it's very nice being with you.
Thank you.
Very nice.
It's really nice talking to all of you. Thank you so much for inviting us in.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Just wonderful